Hi, my name is Corwin Ackerman with AK Studios Design, and today we're talking about designing sourced components into your 3D printed prototypes. Increasing your capabilities, durabilities, and functionality of 3D printed prototypes helps you keep prototyping costs down and keep your prototyping time cycle shorter. So let's get into it.
So we had some issues with this spool holder. It's just too much friction and it would cause the prints to come out shoddy. This could definitely be fixed by just moving this spool holder forward or sanding these plastic wheels, but for the sake of this video, we're going to design something entirely different. So all in, we only spent around an hour designing this. There's certainly some improvements to be made having printed one and put it together, but it works well. So feel free to click the link in the bio below, download these files yourself, and make some improvements. You can see I just put together a little mock-up to see what it would look like in physical space at the height I was thinking, took some measurements of some spools, and laid down some initial thoughts on paper before moving into CAD. And now we print. If you like 3D printing time lapses and want to learn how to make them yourself, you can check out our other video showing you how to do just that. And you can find a link to that video in the description below as well. So here are all the parts we're going to be using to put this spool holder together. A lot of printed parts using PLA and flexible filaments, some used bearings we had laying around, as well as a carbon fiber shaft, some stainless steel pins, stock steel, and a little West Systems epoxy.
So we'll start out with the bases themselves. These things might not look like much, but they actually have pieces of steel and epoxy cast in and around them, which really strengthens the rigidity of these parts.
So you can see in CAD, all we've done to make this possible is create a cavity that allows the steel a place to sit with a little tolerance to allow the epoxy to wrap around that steel, just like setting a post into a concrete footing. Then in our slicer software, we tell it to pause once to put in the steel and at another level to allow us to pour the epoxy in. One tip when you're using epoxy with 3D printed parts is to make sure you clean up any spillage. On one of the stands, I didn't clean up so well and we got a little separation on the stand. A really easy thing to fix with some CA glue, but it's worth taking note of. Using different filaments, like this flexible filament for the part that grabs onto the carbon fiber shaft, help you push your boundaries just like source components do, and worth investigating if you've never used different materials before. And the reason we get such a nice fit here is we've just allowed a tolerance for these parts to fit together. And every printer is going to be a little bit different. This is why it's really important to keep a notebook and keep notes on all your prints, what your tolerances were, different materials in different situations, and that'll allow you to make better decisions moving forward and make less mistakes as time goes on. Another tip to increase your allowable margin of error is to decrease the amount of surface area or contact points between your precision sourced components and your 3D printed parts, which are always going to have some degree of dimensional inaccuracy. Because we design sourced components into our prototypes quite often and we have a good understanding of what our printer's tolerances are, we ended up getting a really nice fit on the first shot. And these are the stainless steel pins that are going to be acting as hinges in these little clamps that slide onto the carbon fiber rod and hold everything together. So the real advantage of using source components shines when you're doing things that are really small. A part like this would normally break if I were to use a snap fit hinge or a little extrusion from the plastic sticking out. And we'll take a quick look in CAD seeing how everything lines up. But like I mentioned before, you can already probably see some issues with this design, and feel free to download the files in the description below and make your own tweaks. We'd love to see them. And now we're just putting a quick assembly together on the benchtop before we bring it over to the printer. And now it's time to install and see how it works. I hope this video has been helpful and maybe you've learned a few things about designing some source components into your 3D printed prototypes. Designing source components into prototypes is one of a few things we do at AK Studios to push the capabilities and functionalities of our prototypes. And you can see this design is a big improvement over our last spool holder. But if you'd like to learn a little bit more about pushing your capabilities of your prototypes, you can check out the paper I wrote on that in the description below. Oh, and don't want to forget these little trays just to hold those extra knickknacks you always have laying around next to the 3D printer. Thanks again for watching our video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one.